we are excited to be here at the English Beat concert here at SLO Brew in downtown San Luis Obispo. This show is brought to you by Numbskull Productions and SLO Brew. All right, well, I have the pleasure of being here with one of my favorite musical performers, Dave Wakeling. Dave, thanks so much for being with us here today. And for folks out there that aren't familiar with your back catalog, I mean, I don't know who isn't, but of course the English Beat formed in 1978 in Birmingham, England. And your band was so instrumental, particularly in the late 70s, the two-tone scene, performing with so many other great bands as well, the Specials, Selector. What are some of the kind of memories that kind of the highlights when you think back to those days, those exciting days? Any memories of performing with other bands that really stand out? Any music festivals?
There was something about the whole scene, really. We were very lucky to have followed punk, and the one thing punk had done was pull down all the buildings and torn up all the rules. Yeah. So for that 3 or 4 year period afterwards, you could more or less do what you liked. There weren't any particular rules. You had a lot of artistic freedom. Record companies were terribly keen not to miss the next best thing. Okay. So if you'd got a room full of people dancing, everybody wanted you to bring out a record. Okay. So it was nice, and you could do shows where you'd got like Teardrop Explodes, Human League and The Beat. But everybody liked all three bands, although now, seen through the lens of 30 years, they were quite different in styles. But at the time, you were allowed to like the Smiths, the Jam, the Cure and The Beat all in the same weekend if you were lucky enough. So that was very lucky, and I always tip my hat to the punks, really, because at least they levelled everything, and in the dust and smoke that followed, we were allowed to play quite fast and free.
One of the things that the two-tone movement really was somewhat unique in relation to punk and new wave and things like that was the emphasis of blending musical styles. You know, different performers, and even at your shows, you know, the different sort of cultural, ethnic and cultural groups that would show up to two-tone shows. I mean, that was a really unique phenomenon at the time. There wasn't a lot of that, particularly at punk shows and things like that.
No, that's right. And I think that's probably why it started in the Midlands, which hadn't really had a very strong punk explosion. Mm-hmm. Most people had gone down to London, mm-hmm. like the Killjoys and the Au Pairs. That was about it, really. Yeah. Industrial areas with car factories, people of all sorts of different colours had been forced to work shoulder to shoulder mm-hmm. for many years. Mm-hmm. And in that situation, I think it wears down a lot of prejudice or uncertainties, which hadn't happened in a lot of other parts of England, especially in the south. So it wasn't really that strange to see people of different colours hanging together or playing in bands together. It wasn't until we played London for the first time, and they liked it, but they were like, "Oh, I like that, like black geezers and white geezers playing together, I like that." We're like, oh, so long as you like it, then great.
You didn't realise that was unusual.
It wasn't particularly, no. Although we'd had this notion of a punky reggae party from house parties we ran in Birmingham with a punk DJ and a reggae DJ. And if you switched it about, you would make just the most wonderful combination. But if you played all punk, the room would be frantic for an hour, then it'd disappear. If you played all dub reggae, people just leaning on the wall, nodding. The combination of the two, and that was our brief. What could you do if you got both of those DJs into the same 3-minute pop song, as catchy as the Monkees, and as subversive as John Lennon with a wry smile? That was the brief. And we got away with it. It was terrific.
I mean, there definitely was no offense by me saying this, but a pop sensibility in terms of a lot of the beat songs and other two-tone artists really condensed. I mean, some folks did dub stuff and extended versions, but I mean, it was in essence a very pop, very short, succinct, powerful, with, as you say, oftentimes subversive or very progressive kind of lyrics.
We wanted it to be catchy, like the Monkees, like Petula Clark, Dusty Springfield, or more recently at the time, the Undertones and the Buzzcocks, and Elvis Costello, I suppose. That notion of the perfect pop song under 3 minutes that fades out quick, leaves you singing it, and you want to hear it again.
Yeah, no filler. Basically.
That was the idea, and of course we were still playing under punk rules when we started our first concerts, so that it was, if you played for more than 45 minutes, you were lying.
Oh, okay.
If you hadn't said everything you needed to say in 45 minutes, that's because you were pulling your punches. And if you're still playing after 45 minutes, you obviously hadn't been trying hard enough.
Then you were in a prog rock band or something. You weren't. Yeah, that punk rock manifesto says short, sweet, hard.
That's
yeah.
right, you know. Now we play for about 2 hours and 20 minutes, but we do mean it.
Yes, it's still as powerful as back then in Birmingham. Dave, another question for you. So obviously, I mean, now and with your solo work, but also going back to the two-tone days, the musical influence were so diverse. And I'm kind of curious, when you were a young boy growing up, what were you listening to? What was really influencing you to get involved, to be a musician ultimately?
Again, I think I was terribly lucky, you know. Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath were the first two local bands that I heard out of Birmingham, so they were the pride of the city.
Yes.
And so black country rock was easily accessible. Okay. And about the same time, on the football terraces, the skinheads were starting to listen to Tighten Up volumes 1, 2, 3 and 4 from Trojan reggae. Yeah. And skinhead reggae, I suppose. And so for a little while I had to be a bit ambiguous. I had to keep my hair so that if I did it back enough, it kind of looked mod. Okay. So I could put a Crombie on and sort of hang with skinheads. Yes. But they'd probably think, oh, he's probably having a trim at the weekend. But it was still, if I messed it up a bit, it was still unruly enough to go and watch a rock band.
You could kind of navigate between those two worlds very carefully.
You had to be very careful, you know what I mean? You get caught the wrong side, you better have good training shoes on. That was that was one of the things I liked about our music scene during the 80s, was that it wasn't, well, it was tribal, but but it wasn't tribal warfare. You know, it was interesting that you could, whereas growing up as a teenager, you did kind of had to like one thing or the other. For example, I grew up, you had to like the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. That's it, you had to choose, you know, which seemed a bit odd at the time.
That's kind of like in the 90s. I was not a teenager in the 90s, sort of, but towards the beginning of the 90s, and Blur and Oasis. Every generation has its sort of polarizing...
Pulp.
Actually, we just saw Pulp up in San Francisco last month. Great performance. Got to meet Candida, the keyboard player, after the show. Wonderful show, yes. Good choice, Dave. I'm glad you took the third option. I like that.
Those three. Yep.
Wonderful. Well, Dave, of course, some very exciting things going on with you and the English Beat. Back in April, a couple months back, you guys performed at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum performance. And what was that like?
It was great. It was the inauguration party, you know, for all the people who are just about to be elevated to sainthood, and lots of free food, and a lot of amazing singers from everything from the 40s and 50s and 60s. Everybody had to like do 2 or 3 songs. So we'd done a taste of Cleveland at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame the year before. Okay. And they liked us because we could get all sorts of different types of people dancing. Everybody, oh, I know this one. Oh, I've always liked these. Why didn't you say? I'm sort of like the group everybody likes that nobody knows the name of, I suppose. Which works out quite well for them sort of events. Yeah. So I keep getting invited. My guitar's fully ensconced there. I go and talk to it most times till people look at me like, Daddy, he's talking to that guitar.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
No,
just you've got your Vox up there next to some other guitars from other great performers.
Yes, it shared a few plays. It was between Jimi Hendrix and Kurt Cobain for a minute. When it first went in, it was right next to Sterling Morrison from the Velvet Underground, who had been my favourite guitarist all the time growing up. I liked his sense of anarchy. And the chap that ran or probably still does, the Hall of Fame, said he started in college radio in the 80s, and me and Roger were his first interview. Oh, wow. And we were very nice to him, and in that interview I'd said that Sterling Morrison was my favourite guitarist. So when he got to run the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, my guitar came in. Wow. He put it next to Sterling Morrison's guitar for me.
See, Dave, you never know when you're talking to interviewers like us. 20 years from now, I might be some rich. Yes, I might be a record exec, and then I'll remember that you wanted to meet Petula Clark because you said she was one of your.
You might not be able to hook me up a bit later.
I will, man. I will.